This is Alex Dirksen for my History 122 final video. I'm going to talk about Bush 1's presidency. He became president in 1989, and the election he was in of 1988 was kind of an interesting one. It really used television and the media to cover the political campaigns, in which the people campaigning, they really tried to attack the other people running, such as Gary Hart, who dropped out after rumors of him sleeping with another woman. And the guy Bush was actually running against, the Democrat Michael Dukakis, who was governor of Massachusetts. His wife was said to have burned the American flag. So it was really kind of just, it was really savage on some of their campaigning tactics. Rather than talking themselves up, they're kind of putting their opponents down. Bush, some of his attacks were that, he was a wimp because he attended Yale and was an Ivy League student, but in reality, he was anything but that. He was a World War II veteran who flew over 58 air missions for the Navy, and he earned 3 air medals for that. His plane was actually shot down, and he survived, so he was really anything but a wimp, which is what his opponents were trying to play him out to be. Some of his points running during his presidency: first of all, he served as VP for 8 years under Ronald Reagan, where a lot of people saw Reagan's success in presidency as Bush's success as well. He became the first VP to become president since Van Buren in 1936, and he was also the first president to be head of the CIA. The big thing he tried to push while running was this quote, "Read my lips, no new taxes." And he would say this in a bunch of his the debates and when he would go speak in front of other people. So he was really pushing for no new taxes, which he eventually broke and likely costed him a chance at re-election. So it was really too bad that he couldn't keep to his word. So like I'd said, he took office in 1989, and in the first year, he tried to ban the importation of semi-automatic weapons. And he had also said previously that he would not do such a thing. But it's kind of funny, it's still relevant today, where Obama's trying to get the ban or more gun control. So some of the issues ongoing are still the same then as it is today. Another very important thing that he did was that same year he assisted Poland in producing a plan for free election in the communist country. And this led to the end of a single party rule in Poland. And since they were a communist country, it was very important that he was involved in that because the Cold War was still going on, and communism was still an issue going on in the world. And then later in that first year of his presidency, the Berlin Wall came down. This was in November of '89, ending the communist rule in Eastern Europe. Bush, he kind of had an interesting take on it. He was very excited that it happened, but he wasn't willing to show that because he didn't want to sort of shove it in the German or Russian face about the wall coming down, because he really wanted to help negotiate a way for the Cold War to end peacefully and not end with a bang. So he needed Gorbachev's partnership to ensure that it really did end peacefully, so he didn't want to shove it in his face that the wall came down. Shortly after it did come down, he met with Gorbachev, and together they both announced that it was effectively over. So it wasn't quite officially done, but both parties were done fighting. And they also sat down and discussed the strengthening of the Soviet Union and the American trade relationship, and the disarmament of the nuclear weapons in the future. this was really a big milestone because the Soviet Union, being a communist country, and the U.S. trying to defeat communism, having those two countries sit down together and really talk about those things and end the Cold War really showed what Bush was trying to accomplish as president in those foreign policy terms. Now, in June 1990, Bush went back on his promises of new taxes and stated that in order to solve the deficit problem with the economy, that there needed to be a tax increase in the 1991 year. And people couldn't have been more upset about this because that was what he really ran on in the 1988 election, was the no new taxes, and everyone was all for that. And now he went back on his word, leaving the American people feeling almost betrayed in sort of a way. And then now also in 1990, in August, is when sort of the whole Cold War comes into effect. In August, Iraq invaded Kuwait, and President Bush essentially gave them a warning that, hey, if you continue to be there, continue to try and take over that land, that the U.S. and other nations were going to get themselves involved, and it wasn't something that the Iraq government and Saddam Hussein really wanted to deal with. So January 17th is really the start of the Persian War, when Operation Desert Storm took place, beginning with an American air attack on Iraq. First of all, Iraq was in Kuwait because they wanted to kind of take control. There was an argument between the Iraqi government and the Kuwait government about who owned the oil-rich lands in that part of the world. So Saddam Hussein decided that the best way to gain control of these oil fields was to try and take it by force. And this really posed a threat to the U.S. because if Hussein and the Iraqis took control of those oil fields, it could really wreak some havoc on the U.S. by giving them the ability to spike the oil prices, or by not even supplying the U.S. with oil. And the U.S. was very dependent on those types of energy sources, so that really, really could have messed things up if he was able to take over those and take control of all that oil distribution. But Bush was able to get many other nations on the U.S. side to help resolve the situation and get Iraq out of Kuwait. And some of these other nations included Russia and China, who were still pretty hostile countries at the time. And he was also able to gain the support of many other Middle Eastern countries, as well as keep Israel out, so other countries didn't feel like they were sort of uniting with Israel, but they were still fighting to help get Iraq out of Kuwait, which was the entire goal of the mission, not to take down the Saddam Hussein and his whole government there. It was just to get them out of Kuwait. So the United Security Council passed Resolution 678, which authorized the United Nations members the right to use any and all necessary means to remove Iraq if they hadn't withdrawn all their forces by January 15th, 1991. So 2 days after this deadline, on January 17th, Operation Desert Storm began, which included those air attacks I spoke about earlier, as well as 500,000 U.S. ground troops. The Iraqi military was obviously quickly overpowered because they had nowhere near as many troops compared to the U.S. ground troops, and this led to a ceasefire in February on the 28th. So after this whole event, Bush became very popular with the American people and had an astounding 84% approval rating, which is just 84% of people, were for him and for what he did. So that's an incredible amount of people in the U.S. So after that sort of got solved later in 91, the Soviet Union also dissolved, And in early '92, Bush met with the new Russian President Yeltsin to discuss the U.S. and Russian relations. And here is where they officially declared the end of the Cold War. So, like I talked about earlier, they sort of said it was over and there wasn't really any fighting. But when he met with Yeltsin to discuss, their relations, they officially declared it all over. And they agreed to try and reduce their nuclear weapons by 2003 at a later meeting between the two. In '92, Bush was also renominated by the Republican Party, but eventually lost to Bill Clinton. And this left Bush only having served one term as president of the U.S. A lot of speculation and reasons why they think he didn't get reelected was because of his renege on his promise of no new taxes. So there's a little short summary about the Bush presidency, and thanks.